B is trying to sell his house. And we are, well, living in 2026, right? So we're doing everything online. We do everything online, right? So B has put up his house for sale online, whether it's some kind of an app, website, whatever it may be. Okay, so B is desperately waiting for someone to buy his house so that he can spend that money to move to a new neighborhood that he has to move to. Okay, but it has been, let's say, a couple of days, maybe a couple of weeks even, and nobody is, yes, contacting B to buy his house. So B is nervous, B is concerned. Okay, so A knows that B is very, very concerned these days because of the house. So A will start today's conversation by saying, let's use a bridge. Someone will buy it. So don't worry. A is going to say, give it some time, don't worry. Sorry. Someone will come and buy it, don't worry. Okay, so A is going to start today's conversation by saying, someone will buy it, so don't worry. Okay, so the first thing that you have to do when you see a bridge is to identify whether it's a reverse bridge or not, right? And yes, most bridges, like if, when, because, they will all be reverse bridges. However, so is not, right? So we will not have the order between the blue and pink 문장 reversed. We will not do it. So therefore, the same order, blue 문장, the bridge, and then the pink 문장. Okay, so on the blue 문장, what do we have? We have the subject, someone, and then we're going to take the verb buy, and we will give it two endings, right? Why is it two? Well, first of all, we have to give it the will ending, and then what do we have to do? We also have to give it the so ending. Why is that? Because a bridge is never an independent standalone. It is never, yes, alone. It has to become a part of the word right in front of it as its ending. Okay, and of course, no it. Of course, we're talking about the house. So we have the subject, someone, and we have the verb, will, buy, so. Okay, so let's first start with the blue 문장. And of course, after we cross the bridge, we have the verb, don't worry. Okay, so how do you say someone? Of course, there are a lot of ways, but 누구, someone. Okay, so 누구, I am going to use it, but I'm not going to use it as it is. I'm going to change it a little bit. Why is that? Because I'm going to give it a subject particle. Am I going to give 누구, someone, a subject particle just because it is the subject? Of course not, right? Because in real Korean, you should not use subject and object particles, right? Unless you have a very, very specific reason. So, of course, using subject and object particles just because you have a subject or object are the rules of textbook poetic Korean. Okay, so in real spoken Korean, you need a very specific reason for you to use a subject particle. Right now, I do have a very specific reason, therefore, I'm going to give 누구 a subject particle. But before we do so, let's keep in mind that there are a couple of words that are very unique in the sense that they have to shapeshift when they are being given a subject particle. That's usually not the case, right? For example, let's say my friend is the subject, 친구. And for whatever reason, I will give it a subject particle. Let's just say, then 친구 does not have to shapeshift. It can just stay as it is, and I can just give it a subject particle, right? 친구가. But there are some words that are unique in the sense that they have to shapeshift first, and then we can give them a subject particle. So what's a very good example of that? Well, I can be a very good example of that, 저, right? If I am the subject, and for whatever reason I will give it the subject particle, I first have to have it shapeshift, and now it's ready to house a subject particle. 제가. Okay, so I is a very good example of that. Well, someone is also a good example of that. In this case, yes, you first have to remove 구, and then you can attach the subject particle. 누가. Okay, so now you can tell that I am using someone but as the subject, not as the object. Okay, so, well, the question is, why am I giving it a subject particle? Once again, this is not textbook poetic Korean, therefore we shouldn't use subject particles for no reason. Well, I'm going to say, of course, depending on perspective, you can say a couple of reasons are applying all at the same time, but the reason that I want to focus right now is reason number 4. When the structure of the sentence alone does not make it clear whether a word is a subject or object. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Now, what do I mean by the structure of the sentence alone not making it clear whether a word is a subject or object? And what could happen because of that? Well, some catastrophic things can happen. So, let's say me and my friend are throwing a party, and I was in charge of preparing a huge cake for all the people who will come to the party. So I actually made a cake. I like baking, so I made a cake. So my friend saw the cake that I made. So he said, "Oh, that's a lovely cake. Okay, we're ready for the party." But then let's say he comes back 3 minutes later and he notices that the cake is no longer there. So he says, "Hey, what happened to the cake?" And I'm going to say, "Well, my cat ate it." Okay, so in this case, I am not going to say, "Well, according to the 3-step rule," anything that is too obvious according to the context will be omitted, right? And then with the words you have left, then you start translating. Okay, so if I'm going to take that into consideration, of course I'm talking about my cat, let's say. There's only one cat in the house, it's my cat. And of course I'm talking about the cake. If my friend says, "Hey, there was a cake here, where did the cake go?" And I'm going to say, "Oh, well, my cat ate it." So I'm going to say the subject cat, and then the verb ate. The object it is going to be invisible, right? So I'm going to say 고양이, cat, and then 먹었어요, ate. Okay, so think about what I just did. There's nothing technically wrong with what I did here. However, it could lead to a catastrophic misunderstanding, right? Because now it could sound like I'm saying, "I ate my cat." Or it could sound like the cat ate the cake. So is it that we have an invisible subject? Or is it that we have an invisible object here? So it's either one of the two. But of course it's the latter. I'm trying to say the cat ate the invisible object, which is it, the cake. I'm not trying to say I ate the cat. But of course, yeah, what if someone does misunderstand like that? And of course, you could say, "Well, according to common sense and context, I think people will understand that you're saying my cat ate it, right?" And my answer would be usually yes. However, you still can't help but think that it sounds outrageous or silly, right? So if you are worried that there is real possibility of people really misunderstanding, or at least if you feel like, I know that you won't misunderstand, but it still sounds outrageous or silly, I don't want to speak like that, then what you can do is you can go out of your way to make it extra, 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 extra clear that this is not the object. I'm not saying I, the subject, ate the cat, which is the object. No, I'm saying the cat, the subject, ate it, the object. So if you want to go out of your way to make it extra, extra clear, then yes, the best way of doing that is to give it a subject particle. 고양이가 먹었어요. Because, yeah, we all know that if I say it like this, it could sound a little bit outrageous or silly. Does that make sense? If it does, 계속할까요? Should we continue? Okay, so that's what I mean by reason number 4. When you feel like the structure of the sentence alone does not make it clear whether a word is a subject or object, and when you feel like because of that there might be a misunderstanding, or because of that my sentence might sound a little bit outrageous or silly. Okay, so now, that's exactly what we have right now as a situation. What if I just say 누구? Now, this doesn't make it clear whether someone is the subject or object. Well, if that's the case, it could sound like I'm saying someone will buy it, or it could sound like I'm saying I will buy someone. Of course, that shouldn't be what I'm saying, right? So, you don't want to sound like you're saying that, right? So, yes, make sure that your sentence does not sound like you're saying I will buy someone. That's one of the last things that you want to say. So make it extra clear by giving it a subject particle. Now I'm saying someone will buy it, not I will buy someone. Okay, so 누가, and then let's place buy, 사다, a version of buy. Okay, but of course I don't want its display form. I don't want the ta ending. So I have to give it two endings, right? First, I have to give it the will future tense ending, and then I have to give it the so ending. So they both belong to inflection route number 2. So let's go to inflection route number 2. So good news, today we will be getting a lot of free passes. So let's say 감사합니다 to inflection route number 2. Okay, so what do I mean by that? So the rules of inflection route number 2. We are in inflection route number 2 because of the future tense ending, right? Okay, so the rules here, if the display form that you are using ends with a vowel, any kind of a vowel, you get a free pass, meaning all you have to do is remove ta and then immediately attach the ending. Okay, so I'm using the future tense ending version number 1, right? 살 거예요. 살 거예요. Will buy. However, if I make it all the way to yo, it means that I have ended the sentence, which is not the case, right? I shouldn't be ending the sentence. I'm just getting started. Because I still have a lot to say. I can't stop here. I have to say, so don't worry. Okay, so I have to stop somewhere so that I don't make it all the way to yo, so that I can give it a second ending, the so ending, right? And yes, the trick is exactly, if you have an ending that has ko somewhere, the ko syllable, that's where you stop. Okay, and then now you can attach the new ending. So what is the new ending? The new ending is 니까, the so ending. The ni까 ending also belongs to inflection route number 2, so we will apply the rules of inflection route number 2, and we know the rules. We just said it, right? If something ends with a vowel, once ta is removed, we already removed ta, so it's ending with a vowel. So whatever you're trying to attach the ending to, if it ends with a vowel and there is no ta in the way, you can immediately attach. Okay, so 살 거니까. Okay, 살 거니까. 살 거니까. So will buy so. Okay. Push it up a little bit. 누가 살 거, and then now 다리 건너요. Let's cross the bridge. Will buy. So, okay. So now we finished the blue 문장 and now we're crossing the 다리, the bridge, right? 누가 살 거니까. And then, yes, now let's go to don't worry. Thank you. That's very generous of you to say, but thank you. Okay, so the display form of the verb worry, 걱정하다. Okay, so of course I don't want the ta ending. I don't want its display form ending. I want an actual ending. Okay, so we need to place don't in front of it, right? So let's talk about the 3 ways you can place don't with a verb. Okay, so we know what to do, right? So there are, in large, 3 ways of placing don't in front of a verb in Korean, right? And yes, we right now need method number 3. Okay, so what is number 1? Yes, place an as don't and then say whatever verb you want to say. What's method number 2? Place the verb, give it the 지 않아요 ending, which is the poetic trap I always say. Outside of very, very, very rare exceptions, do not use method number 2, right? It's the poetic trap. It makes you extremely and intimidatingly poetic. Okay, so method number 3, on the other hand, functionally speaking, is completely in its own lane, right? So what's method number 3? Yes, place the verb and give it the 지 마요 ending. Okay, so method number 3 is specifically used when you're telling the listener not to do something, right? In other words, when your sentence is an imperative. Exactly. So if I'm telling you not to do something, hey, don't do that, then it's 지 마요, verb 지 마요. Okay, so 지 마요, luckily, is a no-route ending. What does that mean? What is a no-route ending? A no-route ending is an ending that you can, in all cases, immediately attach to a word, a verb or adjective, as long as there is no ta in the way. So just remove ta and then immediately attach. How convenient is that? Unfortunately, most no-route endings belong to textbook poetic Korean, right? But still, in spoken Korean, you still do get some, so let's enjoy when we have one. Okay, 걱정하지 마요. And once again, the tip that I always share when it comes to 발음, pronunciation, right, is if you see an H sound somewhere in the middle of a word, think of it as practically silent, right? So we're not going to say 걱정하지 마요. We're just going to say 걱정하지 마요, as if it is not there at all. Okay, so now what do we have? I'm sorry, let me just push it to the left a little bit. Now, not only do we have don't worry, we actually have the whole sentence, whole 문장, right? Let me just try to fit it in here. Okay, so once again, no H sound. Okay, don't worry. So now we have the whole 문장. 천천히 읽을게요. I will read it slowly. 누가 살 거니까 걱정하지 마요. 누가 살 거니까 걱정하지 마요. 누가 살 거니까 걱정하지 마요. Okay, does that make sense? If it does, 넘어갈까요? Should we move on? Okay. Let's move on then. So let's take a look into what B has to say. Oops. Okay, so now B is going to say, there's good news. So once again, if I were to remind you of the whole context, B put his house up for sale online, whether it's some kind of a website or app, whatever. So B was waiting for someone, to reach out and say, I'm interested in buying your house. Okay, so A was saying, 누가 살 거니까 걱정하지 마요. Don't worry, someone will come and buy it. Okay, but good news. As A was speaking, B was just checking his email or app right now, as we are speaking. And B is going to say, oh, I think that. So this, of course, it's going to be a little bit of a different sentiment, a different speech way of speaking, but this is how you would say it in Korean. I think an inquiry came just now. Just now, literally right now. Just now, as you were speaking. Okay, so now, of course, I'm talking about I and no us and does, no articles, right? So what are we going to do? We're going to take the verb came and we're going to give it the think that ending. And then what came? The subject, inquiry came. Okay, so inquiry came, the subject came. Okay, so the subject inquiry and the verb think that came. And then, yes, let's look at just now as time. Okay, so of course, if I were to do things the standard way, I would say subject, time, and then verb, right? But of course, I don't always have to do things the standard way. I can sometimes do something unorthodox if I want to, because, well, not just for the sake of doing it, because I'm going to take into consideration the general theme of Korean grammar, which is the later it appears, the more important it is. So what I can do is I want the subject to be more emphasized than time, for example. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag it all the way here so that it appears after time. Why? Because I want it to be more emphasized. That's what I mean by the later it appears, the more important it is. So this time, because B is very focused on inquiry, because this is what B was waiting for. Finally, an inquiry came just now. Okay, so let's say just now, inquiry, and then think that came. Time, subject, and then verb. Okay, so even though I'm going to drag the subject all the way here, once again, even when you're doing that, nothing can trump the verb, predicative adjective, or subject complement plus ending mark. Okay, so the word that will give off the nuance of just now, 방금. Just now. 방금, 방금. And then inquiry, 문의. 문의, inquiry. Okay, before we move on, a little tip on 발음, pronunciation is, yes, this double vowel right here that you are seeing in 의, yes, it rarely actually sounds like 의, right? Of course, there are more variables to this, but since it's not the main topic, I cannot spend all the time here, so I'll overly simplify, and for now just say, it rarely sounds like 의. Usually when it sounds actually like 의 is when it's at the very first syllable, and the consonant happens to be the circle placeholder consonant. If that's not the case, then it usually just sounds like I or 에. Okay, so right now it will sound like I. That's why I'm not saying 문의, I'm saying 문의. Okay, so that's why we have a PDF file on pronunciation advanced, and that's why it's 162 pages, right? Because there are a lot of variables that you have to keep in mind. Okay, so if you go to my TikTok bio, you will have access to the PDF file. Okay, you'll see the links to the PDF file, I should say. Okay, so 문의. I'm not going to say 문의, 문의. And then, yes, 오다, come. But I need the think that ending. Okay, and the think that ending happens to be a shapeshifter, right? Okay, so what is a shapeshifter? In other words, irregular ending. So once again, there's a PDF file for irregular endings, right? So those who have it, you can take a look at page number 1. And yes, we'll lay out the whole paradigm with examples. Anyway, for now, what is an irregular ending, a shapeshifter? Well, an ending that keeps on shapeshifting according to two factors. Number one, what's the tense? Number two, are you giving it to a verb, adjective, or noun? Okay, so right now, we are giving it to verb past tense, right? Because I said, think that came. I think that an inquiry came. So verb in past tense. Okay, so if it's going to go to a verb in past tense, then N 것 같아요. But, sorry, first inflection route number 2. But, yes, whenever you are using an ending that has 같아요 somewhere, there's always a tip that you have to be mindful of, right? Yes, it does look like 것 같아요, but if you actually say it like that, it sounds intimidatingly poetic. So when it's actually said, it will always sound like 것 같아요. Okay, I will write it like this, but I will never actually say it like this. So 것 같아요, pronunciation-wise. Okay, so for example, if I was giving it to a verb in present tense, for example, if I'm saying, I think he comes, then often, then a no route ending, 는, once again, 는 것 같아요, I will write it like this. For example, if I'm going to give it to an adjective in present tense, once again, 것 같아요, but actually 것 같아요. Inflection route number 2 again. So this is why irregular endings, in other words, shapeshifters, can be very tricky. So it requires a lot of time to study. Okay, so right now, once again, this is what we need. Inflection route number 2. So let's go to inflection route number 2. Okay, so today we're gonna get a lot of free passes. That's good. Why are we getting a free pass? Once again, because the rules of inflection route number 2, if something ends with a vowel, once ta is removed, then you can automatically attach the ending, what I call a free pass. Okay, N 것 같아요 in writing, but when actually said, 것 같아요. Okay, so I'm going to immediately attach it. 온 것 같아요, but when actually saying it, 온 것 같아요. Okay, when actually saying it, it will sound like 온 것 같아요. Okay, so now we have think that came. Okay, so because we used the verb past tense version of think that ending, the past tense is already built in. 온 것 같아요. 온 것 같아요. Think that came. Okay, so now by saying think that came, we actually have the whole sentence, right? So 온 거, yes, the pronunciation will not match the writing. Think that came. Okay, so now we have the whole 문장, right? So 천천히 읽을게요. 방금 문이 온 거 같아요. 방금 문이 온 거 같아요. 방금 문이 온 거 같아요. Okay, does that make sense? If it does, 넘어갈까요? Should we move on? Okay. So, yes, if you're newly joining, and therefore if you are having a hard time keeping up, we have a YouTube channel and also PDF files to help you catch up and ultimately start better keeping up with the lives. If you go to my TikTok bio, you will see the links. Okay, so now, let's say this inquiry that we're talking about came in the form of an email. Okay, so what B is going to do is B is going to open the email and read it verbatim. Okay, word to word. B is not going to paraphrase, change the way it sounds. No, just going to read it verbatim, word to word. Okay, why am I emphasizing this? Because we're going to play a different game, right? If someone is trying to buy a house, therefore they are inquiring to buy, to purchase the house, then that's a professional situation. Therefore, and plus, if I'm writing a formal email, then of course that adds to how professional I'm going to carry myself. Okay, so we're going to speak professional Korean. It's going to be, yeah, so we're playing a completely different game now, right? So I'm going to show you a sentence, but don't speak like this. The only reason why B can say this is because B is just reading an email that someone wrote in professional Korean verbatim, word to word. So that's the only reason why B can say it like this without sounding extremely awkward or poetic. And moreover, the format will be in honorifics version number 1 usually because professional Korean, but today let's talk about something that is very, very important. So it's not going to be in honorifics version number 1. Okay, so usually when we change the game into professional Korean from spoken Korean, we also changed the format, right? From honorifics version number 2 to 1. Right? But today, 오늘, we are not going to do that, and I will explain why. Okay, so first of all, what is the email saying? B is just reading the email. It says, when is moving in possible? So this is how you could say it in Korean. Okay, so the email is asking, yeah, well, if I buy the house, yeah, so let's say I buy the house today. Well, then I know when I bought it, but when can I move in though? When can I actually move in? So when is moving in possible? Okay, so now we have the adverb when, and no is, am, was, were, are, and the subject moving in. And possible, predicative adjective, possible. Okay, so yes, it is a verb, move, but if we give it ing to form a gerund, now it has noun properties, right? And a noun can be a subject. Yes, it is the subject. Moving in is possible. So a noun that can come in front of is, am, was, were, are, moving in is possible. Yeah, the subject. Okay, so now I'm going to explain now why we're not going to say this in honorifics version number 1, even though it is professional Korean. Okay, so I don't think I explained this very often these days, 요즘. But I used to a long time ago. Some of you sparkles who have been attending these lives for a long time might remember that I used to explain this very, very 자주, often, right? Okay, so first of all, what is honorifics version number, 1, what I call honorifics version number 1, a way of speaking in which your sentences end with 니다, usually, or 니까. Of course, there's 히다 and 히오 as well, but usually 니다 or 니까. Honorifics version number 2, 2. What's honorifics version number 2? A way of speaking in which your sentences end with 요. Okay, so now, usually, honorifics version number 2 will be used for spoken Korean, right? But if you're playing another game, for example, like poetic Korean, professional Korean, playful Korean, whatever, then yes, you can use honorifics version number 1. So now, 니다 is what in honorifics version number 1, that is when you are saying something and it's just a normal statement. It's just a normal declarative sentence. It's not a question. 니까 is an ending that automatically indicates that you are asking a question, right? So, but once again, you really don't speak honorifics version number 1 unless you are not speaking spoken Korean. You're speaking professional Korean, poetic Korean, playful Korean, or soldier Korean. Okay, So then what is the equivalent of this in honorifics version number 2? Well, of course, I say there are some endings that can automatically indicate that your sentence is a question, but I used to say this very, very often, right? The best way in honorifics version number 2 to change a statement into a question, and also the other way around, is to do nothing. Don't change anything. Just say you as if you're just saying a normal statement, but if it's a question, just add a question mark there. Don't change anything. Don't try to use an ending for that. Don't grammatically change the structure of the sentence. So, in honorifics version number 2, the best way to change a statement into a question and a question into a statement usually is to do nothing. So for example, if I'm going to say 여름, summer, like, 좋아하다. But of course, I'm going to inflect it into its actual form. 좋아해요. So if I say 여름 좋아해요, it's I like summer. But if I'm going to change it into a question, I'm going to change nothing. I'm just going to place a question mark when writing and raise my tone at the very last syllable when speaking. 여름 좋아해요? Do you like summer? Okay, so this is the best way you would do it in spoken Korean. However, we are speaking professional Korean right now because we're writing an email. Okay, so then you could say, well, you said if you're speaking professional Korean, you usually switch mode into honorifics version number 1. And let's say in a professional setting, a business type setting, if I'm going to ask a question, that means I'm going to use 니까, right? Okay, so the answer to that is usually a no. Okay, so I'm going to explain why. I'm going to elaborate. So yes, I did say if you are switching mode into professional/business Korean, yes, you usually change the game into honorifics version number 1. But even in that case, 니까 sounds too stiff. So 니까 is not even used that often, even in professional Korean. So then when is it used? What's even more of a stiff situation than when you're being super, super professional? Well, there's a very, very good example of that, right? Soldier Korean. So, yes, in soldier Korean, that's when you use 니까, when you are asking a question. Okay, so even in professional Korean, yes, you will use 니다, but you will not use 니까. It's not for even professional Korean that often. Of course, sometimes, but usually, no, not even in professional Korean. So you are going to use it in soldier Korean. Okay, does that make sense? If it does, 계속할까요? Okay, so then, of course, the natural question would be, then, how do I ask a question? If I am speaking professional Korean and I'm trying to ask a question, then what do I do? Do I do the same thing that I do in honorifics version number 2, which is to just use 니다 and just add a question mark? No. What you will do is, when you're speaking professional Korean and you're asking a question, go back to honorifics version number 2 a little bit. Go back to it a little bit. And we're going to use the professional question ending. So it's also a shapeshifter, the professional question ending, an ending that you can use to imbue a professional nuance when you're asking a question. Okay, so it will be much better than saying 니까, staying in honorifics version number 1. Okay, so what is that ending? The ending is a shapeshifter, an irregular ending, so therefore it looks different. It keeps on shapeshifting according to 2 factors again. What's the tense? Are you giving it to a verb, adjective, or noun? Okay, so right now we're saying when is moving in possible? So I said is possible. So because there's is, yeah, I know that it's an adjective. And because it's is and not was or will be, I know that it's not past tense and it's not future tense either. So it's present tense. Adjective in present tense. The adjective possible in present tense. In that case, it's, oops, I'm sorry, this marker is asking to retire. And 가요. Okay, inflection route number 2. But what if you are giving it to a verb in present tense? Then it's 나요. A no route ending. Okay, so once again, a shapeshifter. They can be tricky. Okay, so once again, I'm going to use this. So it means that if you are speaking professional Korean, then what does that mean? You'll either end your sentences in 니다, or when you're asking a question, you'll go back to honorifics version number 2 for a little bit to go get the professional question ending. Okay, so this is what you would do in professional Korean. Even in professional Korean, 니까 is not used that often. Once again, where do you hear it all the time? In the military. Okay, so that's why when you go to the military in South Korea, they literally have a term that says 다나까. Okay, so people really say, hey, speak 다나까. Hey, do you know how to speak? Oh, not do you know. Have you made a habit of speaking 다나까? And then when you finish your service and go back to being a normal civilian, people say, oh, you're still speaking 다나까. Okay, what does this mean? 나 is a version of or, right? A way of placing or in between two nouns. Yeah, so it's a way of calling, a way of speaking that soldiers use. So, 다나까, because 다 or 까, it comes from people saying that, oh, when soldiers speak, their sentences always end with 다 or 까. So 다 or 까. That's why it became somewhat of a word. So people say, hey, you finished your service about 7 months ago. You're still speaking 다나까. Why are you doing that? Okay. So once again, even in professional Korean, do not use 니까. Go back to honorifics version number 2, a way of speaking in which your sentences end with 요, and use the professional question ending. And once again, because it's the professional question ending, when you're just speaking normal spoken Korean, do not use it either. If you are speaking just normal spoken Korean, stay here. Just use 요 when your sentence is a normal statement, and if it's a question, yeah, just stay with 요 and just add a question mark. Okay, so we're going to use this, the adjective present tense version of it. But first, okay. Now, before we get there, let's first say the subject and then the adverb and then the predicative adjective. Subject, adverb, predicative adjective. So I'm going to show you a do-noun verb. 입주하다. 입주하다. Okay, so we know it's a do-noun verb, right? So, what is a do-noun verb? A verb that was made into a verb through the simple mechanism of just simply taking do and attaching a noun to it. So, if this is move in, so this is a professional way of saying move in. You bought a house, you have to move in, right? 입주하다. So, the good thing about do-noun verbs is, if I learn one word, I'm learning 2 words at the same time, right? Because I said it's simply a combination of a noun and do. So if someone comes to me and says, this is apologize, 사과하다, then I know that 사과 alone must be apology. Okay, so yeah, I can just take away 하다 and I now have a noun, moving in. Let's just call it moving in, 입주. Okay, so, sorry about that. Okay, now we're going to do something that is very, very subtle and delicate to understand. I'm going to actually use a difference particle here. So why am I going to do that? Because, let's carefully think about this. What I'm saying is, hey, I'm not asking when can I buy the house because I know that, of course, I make the decision. I have to transfer money, so I know when I'm gonna buy it. But I'm talking about moving in. When is that available? So, yes, I'm going to use a difference particle to indicate that moving in is a little bit different from buying the house. In what sense? In the sense that buying it, I know exactly when I can do that. When I make the decision, of course, it's my money. So I will decide when I can buy it. And of course, let's say B just wrote like an ad saying exactly when you can buy it. But compared to buying the house, now moving in is a little bit different in the sense that buying it, I know exactly when I can do it, but moving in, I don't know exactly when I can do it. So it's different in that sense from buying the house. So I'm going to use a difference particle here. So once again, we are not going to call it topic marker particles, right? Because that kind of a labeling is for textbook poetic Korean. Okay, so 입주는, 입주는, and then let's place when, 언제, 입주는 언제, and then possible. A version of possible would be 가능하다. Okay, I don't want its display form. I don't want the ta ending. I want an actual ending. And once again, yeah, I'm going to use the professional question ending, the adjective present tense version, 엔가요, inflection route number 2. And once again, this is why I said today, 오늘, we will be getting a whole bunch of free passes. So let's say, 감사합니다. Thank you. Okay. Why is that? Once again, because the display form that we are using is ending with a vowel. 가능하다. Okay, 엔가요. So because it ends with a vowel, I get a free pass. All I have to do, remove ta, and then I can 바로 immediately attach the ending, right? Oh, what's up with this marker? Okay, so now we have 가능한가요? And once again, the H silent. I'm not going to say 가능한가요? I'm just going to say 가능한가요? 가능한가요? Possible is possible. Okay, but once again, now I'm carrying a very professional tone. And also, because of that, it sounds more polite and it even sounds a little bit more soft spoken. So I would say only pros, almost no cons. Okay, does that make sense? If it does, 계속할까요? Should we continue? Oops, I'm sorry about that. Okay. But, of course, don't speak like this unless you feel like you are in the middle of some kind of a professional endeavor. 가능한가요? What's happening here? The color. Anyway, okay, possible. Okay, so now we have the whole 문장 천천히 읽을게요. 입주는 언제 가능한가요? 입주는 언제 가능한가요? 입주는 언제 가능한가요? Okay, so you shouldn't speak like this. The only reason why B is using this ending is because, yes, B is reading an email verbatim, word to word. He is not paraphrasing at all. And an email is usually written in professional Korean. Therefore, that's the only reason why we're going to use the 엔가요 ending. Okay? Does that make sense? If it does, 넘어갈까요? Thank you, thank you. 감사합니다. Okay, so now we have the whole 대화 then, the whole conversation. So 천천히 읽을게요. I will read it slowly at first, but of course we're going to speed up. So 누가 살 거니까 걱정하지 마요. 방금 문의 온 거 같아요. 입주는 언제 가능한가요? With more 속도, speed. 누가 살 거니까 걱정하지 마요. 방금 문의 온 거 같아요. 입주는 언제 가능한가요? With extra 속도. 누가 살 거니까 걱정하지 마요. 방금 문의 온 거 같아요. 입주는 언제 가능한가요?